We have the Houston Texans at, quote unquote, at, because who knows what the home crowd uplift is going to be this year. So I always say that. For the most part, it's going to be empty stadiums. I think Kansas City has like 20% occupancy, but it's Houston Texans versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Fantasy football, you got to love this game. Two offenses. I know people have been kind of down-talking Houston, but hey, man, they have Deshaun Watson. They're going to be able to move the ball. How do you like this game? Who do you think is going to start from a fantasy football point of view, David?
Well, I think the first thing you mentioned has to be said at the beginning of any betting spread segment this year. It's that home field advantage, right?
Yeah, right.
In the past, I've just gotten into betting probably 2 years ago. I've noticed I maybe didn't focus on that home field advantage as much as I should have, and that was kind of a rookie mistake to betting. Yeah. And now I'm starting to think this year, we almost got to throw it out the window. You mentioned 25% capacity, and they're still playing. It's their home stadium. They're used to it. They're going to be used to it. But I don't know if I'm giving the home field team much of an advantage at all this year.
Yeah, usually.
Last year.
Sorry, go ahead, please.
I was just going to look at last year. The way they finished it, it was 51-31 final score in that playoff game. The Texans obviously started off 21-0, but we should be expecting some fireworks, and I don't think anybody is expecting anything less to start off week one.
Yeah, I'm not even paying attention to the over-under. Usually when I bet, it's usually kind of offense, defense, analytics, how the matchups. It's kind of the same thing I do. Actually, the genesis of Fantasy Football Almanac came from my betting service, which for some reason nobody wanted, even though I hit 60% every year. So nobody wants it. I think what it is, it's one of those things, people see 60%, they don't believe it, which I completely get. But I do put my money where my mouth is. Although I will say the way my analytics work out, they usually need some in-season data, like 2 or 3 weeks. So this episode, it's a little bit of a kind of a rolling thing. A lot of it's kind of my gut as opposed to checking it back with a computer. But we'll talk about that. Let me hit you with some fantasy football projections because I do have all the projections for all the games for the different positions. So I'll tell you kind of just run through for both teams. Actually, well, let's just start with the Houston Texans. I have Deshaun Watson at a 26, definitely getting in the end zone a number of times. I have David Johnson at 12, which is startable, but usually I'm looking for 11 and above there. And I have Duke Johnson actually kind of splitting snaps this week. Now, again, we're going to see a lot of this is based on kind of schematics. A lot of this, yes, we have some future projection stuff in here, but we got to see how David Johnson and Duke Johnson are going to split snaps. So that's a big storyline, a big watch point. At wide receiver, Will Fuller to me is a start. Brandon Cooks is a start, and then we'll see what happens behind them. And then a tight end, Darren Fells is one of these guys that with DeAndre Hopkins being gone could get you some juice, could get you especially in a PPR format. These projections are coming back in a PPR format. So I have him as kind of like a fringe start, probably not going to make a starting rosters this week. But if this were like week 10 and you needed some help off the bench or something like that, Darren Fells could be kind of a starter for me, but he's one of these under-the-radar guys. What do you think about those projections, David?
That's great. I just want to hit on what they did last year in that playoff matchup because that's just kind of what I'm using to base this week's matchup on. Watson went 31-52 last year for 388 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns. He also rushed 6 times for 37 yards and a rushing touchdown. So DFS, you're paying up for Deshaun Watson. Mahomes as well. He was 23 of 35 last year for 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. The big point scorers in that Chiefs game for the playoff game last year, Travis Kelce and Damian Williams each scored 3 touchdowns. So I think Travis Kelce, you're paying up for him as well. CEH, he could be off to a hot start if, again, they're kind of using the running back like they did against Houston last year. And one more thing that stands out to me last year in that playoff matchup, Tyreek Hill had only 3 receptions for 41 yards on 4 targets.
How about that?
So I'm a little skeptical about Tyreek Hill in DFS. I think I'd rather spend my money elsewhere.
Yeah, I agree with that. In DFS, it's all about bang for buck, right? It's all about, and again, that's a lot of what this almanac does. What do you think about the receivers in Houston, man? Because Will Fuller, of course, I've gone in the depth charts. Will Fuller is at the top of the depth chart, but you can't trust that guy's hamstrings. So, I mean, what are you doing if in your redraft leagues or your keeper league or whatever, just not outside of DFS? What are you doing with those wide receivers if you have them?
Well, I don't have Will Fuller on a single roster to say. I've been targeting Brandon Cooks over him.
Yeah, value
in every draft. I think he's the clear wide receiver one. Doesn't come with as big of the injury risks that Fuller comes with. And you look at last year, Fuller didn't do that great against the Chiefs. DeAndre Hopkins, though, he had 14 targets, 9 receptions, over 100 yards. I think if I'm paying up, I would pay up for Fuller too. He could have a big week this week. But I think I'd rather probably pay up for Brandon Cooks.
Sure. Now, to wrap things up for the Kansas City projections, I have Kansas City. Obviously, Mahomes is a start. I actually have him outperforming Deshaun Watson this week, barely. CEH, we'll see what happens with Edwards-Helaire, but I think he's definitely – I mean, obviously, if you draft him, you're going to be starting him this week. Nobody's going to be playing the bench game this week. I'm curious to see, how Darrell Williams is going to be used. DeAndre Washington was waived. I've always felt that he would be a short yardage, maybe goal line type guy, but as we talked about in recent weeks, Edwards-Helaire can push the pile. So I'm very curious to see how those snaps get distributed in short yardage situations. Tyreek Hill, for me, is a start. Is he a daily fantasy guy? I don't know, but I think he's going to be a monster this week. I'd love to see this matchup. Maybe some of that playoff game with schematics. Maybe they're trying to limit him. We'll see. Kelsey is a start. I don't even care if the projection is bad. Kelsey's a start every week, but I have him getting in the end zone definitely this week. So lock that in. And then I actually would prefer to start Hardman over Watkins this week. But again, this year's going to tell going to be the test, I guess. It's Hardman. I think he's going to be a great projection. I think he's going to be a great receiver. I think by the end of the year, he's going to be definitely the wide receiver too, probably the third receiving option behind Kelsey and Hill this year. But we'll see. Let me hit you with the over/under, David, for this game, and we'll move it on to the next one. Houston Texans, according to Bovada, are plus 9.5. That's a big line, man. Plus 9.5 at the Kansas City Chiefs. Who are you taking?
I'm taking the over just because the Chiefs won by 20 last year. And let me just hit you with one more thing. I know we're spending a lot of time on this Thursday game, but it's the most important one. Is. And I was reminded by this by my friend on Twitter, Deep Dive Fantasy Football. I believe it's at Deep Dive FF. Don't quote me on that. But with these Thursday games, if you're in a league where you can drop players after the Thursday game, if Darrell Williams is available, if Duke Johnson, if you're in a shallower league, is available, go pick him up for the Thursday night game. See if David Johnson gets hurt. See if Darrell Williams emerges in a committee with CEH. If it doesn't happen, you can drop him Friday, re-pick up whatever it was, drop your kicker, whatever you need to do. Because it's big. You can hit on one of these guys and take a chance, and you really have nothing to lose.
Right, and you want to take those chances before week one because you don't want them to explode week one, and then you got to battle everybody else in waivers. That's great advice. Yeah, that's great advice. I am actually, so this is interesting. People that follow me, they know I have quote-unquote Rockobot, my pick engine. Rockobot's on Houston to cover but lose. I am on Kansas City. It's week one, so I don't necessarily trust Rockobot just yet, but we'll see how those goes, and we'll track them throughout the year.